A 100-year life. So this is the commonplace binder, commonplace book. I'm going to set this down now. So obviously this is the same playlist. This is the number. That's this video. That's the next video. We're going to go through this one column at a time. Let's do it. A 100-year life. So how is that going to help you with how to use my system? Like, how is a 100-year-old life or a 100-year life going to assist? Well, all you have to do is write out where you want to be when you're 100. And so one thing that might help is just writing out the year that it's going to be when you are 100. Because if you don't know when that is, it might be a little bit difficult to plan around all the other things. Because if you're writing out a full 100 years, you're probably going to interact with new technology. And so if we don't know when the year is, we're not going to know what the new technology is. Of course, this is a guess. But if you keep guessing the thing for long enough, the chance will probably get a little bit better of the thing being correct. Externalizing thinking. So the reason why thinking about something for a long time is helpful is because we actually process all of it. But sometimes there's a little bit too much information. And so sometimes the information that we're going to be thinking about doesn't need to be memorized in the moment, and we need to put it in a place. And so that is when I use the commonplace binder. Although realistically, it's just a binder that I put pages in, and then I write stuff on the pages. Training wheels. So I don't know if this can really be considered training wheels, because you're not really preparing for a new thing. It's just kind of have a big guiding light to aim for, and in that way it's you create the maze and then solve the maze backwards rather than just trying to live life. So in some ways this is a very robotic way of existing, but if you have no idea what you're doing, it might be better to have more of a robot life than no life at all. So let's start with my YouTube story. So I realized I wanted to make videos like this, and hopefully better than this at some point. But I was never going to be able to make the better videos consistently unless I could make videos consistently in the first place. And so the first step was just to make a video. So I did that back in 2010. I think I made one video, and it was basically I got upset at people for not being able to play a game properly, even though they were making YouTube videos about it. And so it's you know what, I'm going to make a video on how to do this properly. And it got a few hundred views, because back then there was basically nobody making video content, and there were a lot of people watching it. So if you uploaded anything, it would get views. I think it was okay though. But I decided to wait because I was okay, so I'm a young teenager at a prep school, meaning I have no time, and there's always a chance that someone's going to take all my money if I make the money in the first place. So I should probably just wait. I should probably write this stuff down. And so what I did is I waited, and I wrote stuff down, and I watched videos. And then back in 2021, made a gaming channel, because the gaming channel was all about whatever I did the most that was considered acceptable, that I did to an unacceptable level. So I played way too many games, or I played the same games for way too long every day. And so what I did was I just converted half the gaming time into recording and editing and posting and all that other stuff. And so that way I could create a channel that had hundreds of videos on it, even if they were just kind of crappy clips. It would help me prioritize what was actually important. And in the future, I would only take on projects and new friends that would make the videos better, or wouldn't make them worse. So in some ways that's kind of a friend thing, or it helps with making friends, or at least choosing which friends to get, because the friends would have to be people who don't say slurs, because you can't really put that in a video. You can't be yeah, this is my buddy who says slurs all the time. You don't really want that. And there are a whole bunch of other useful things that happened along with that. And then in 2022, I was okay, I did the easy thing that I want to do less of. Now let's do the hard thing that I want to do more of. And I was like, I should go outside because I don't do that very often. You know, I'm a little pale. And so I was like, maybe I could go outside. And so I went outside and I took pictures of stuff and, you know, some little videos. And it turns out that the videos that people liked were the ones of plants. So I was like, okay, you know, the plants are outside. I can just go see the plant. And then I found out you can more than 10 times the views if you just add a little name tag to the plant. Because people are like, ooh, I want to know what Olivia's up to. Even though it's just, you just added a little name tag to a plant. Whatever. So then in 2023, I made this channel. Although technically it says 2022 because a few months earlier I actually made like the email. And the account was created, so yeah. Then it was one video per month, and then one video per week, and then 2 videos per week, and here we are, making 2 videos per week, but on a specific subject as one sort of playlist. So in the future, probably going to break the playlist down a little bit because 100 videos in a playlist is a little bit long. So I might chop it down into 5 sets of 20. But I don't know. We'll see what happens. Slow realizations. Yeah, some things aren't super clear immediately. Like, for example, this whole YouTube story, it wasn't just like, oh, I need to do all these extra steps because they're actually going to help me. Some of it was, I was just a little freaked out. Because the thing is, in real life, I interact with all those people that people have never met until they go online. In the sense of, like, they're very stressful to be around. So, you know, playing, like, competitive video games, for example, very friendly people compared to the people I interact with in real life a lot of the time. So, it was helpful to have that perspective. To know that, oh, yeah, the people I'm interacting with are actually kind of unpleasant sometimes. And so if I can't find friendly people where I live, maybe I should just stay online. And I could have realized that eventually on my own, but writing the stuff down, you know, like all the different quotes from people and trying to line everything up and just finding out it's not always a super friendly place. It was a lot easier to write that down rather than just like experience all of the feelings immediately. It might be I could have experienced them all on my own, but, you know, it can be a little stressful. Half-baked projects. So this video is a little bit all over the place. It's a little bit janky, and part of the reason for that is because the majority of the stuff was drawn from a word bank rather than a specific set of data, and I found that the longer the text is, the more all over the place it is. It gets more choppy, and I get really distracted. But these are quite clear. They, you know, that's the same as the title, and this is a pretty common thing that people suggest when talking about this sort of project. But we are talking about a 100-year-old. No, we're talking about what it takes to be a 100-year-old. What it takes to be a 100-year-old. There will be lots of half-baked projects if you live to 100. And so that's one of the benefits of writing everything out. We can figure out it's going to take a while and then realize if you're only 20 or if you're only 30, out of 100, you know, that's not very old, so you can mess around and you can make mistakes because life is still going to be there. Obviously, if you have no arms, legs, or, I don't know, teeth, just to name a random thing. I assume the hair would go before the teeth, but if you get to be really old and you don't have any limbs left, like it's probably not going to go well. It might be fine, but for students to optimize. So it's all fine and good if I make my own little system and I sit in the corner and I write out all my stuff and I get my realizations and I'm like, wow, you know, this is great. But what happens afterwards? If you're living to 100, you're probably going to share some stuff with some people at some point. But what I realized when I did this little exercise back when I was like 15 is I realized it doesn't make sense to make something just for myself, because even if the objective is to follow like the standard conservative way through life, where it's like, get a significant other, make them a spouse, have tons of kids, make sure those kids have kids, you know, you got the grandchildren and all the other stuff. If you're only making stuff for yourself, if you're living to be 100, you're gonna have the kids and the grandkids to take care of, or at least interact with, and it might be good for them to not be complete morons. So if you make your system, you should probably consider externalizing your thinking by actually making something for the students to optimize, because if the school system is trash, then the kids and the grandkids might also kind of suck. So in some ways, it's beneficial to help out the students just because you're going to help out yourself. Obviously, not every 100-year-old is going to have descendants. But, you know, there is the possibility of meeting people, and we're just going to move on. Fear of being judged. Oh. So it might be that you're being judged right now. It might be that you're judging people right now. It might be that I'm judging people right now. No, I'm probably being judged because this is a video format, which is fine. I don't really care. I mean, I do. I'm going to have slow realizations about that in the future when I write this stuff down. And I really experience it. But it might be that I don't need to worry about that. And so externalizing the thinking, rather than just getting caught in the weeds and thinking about the thing over and over and over again, is that I don't necessarily have to go through this. I say I'm going to go through it, and I'm probably going to go through it, but am I going to go through like all of the binders I have? Probably not. And so that's really good, because any of the stressful thoughts that someone has before bed, or after waking up, or just in the shower, or when they're traveling, you can just write them down, revisit the nice ones, build on those, and that should be good. An intergenerational hobby. So my system is for me. It might be, I don't even make it halfway to this. I have made it more than a quarter, so that's pretty good. I did make it past 25. I'm very happy about that. I feel like it would be a little embarrassing for someone with multiple male relatives over 100 to not make it to 25. I mean, obviously, that would be more of a question of poverty than, you know, genetics in most cases. Because if you're living over 100 as a man, that's pretty uncommon. And considering there are multiple relatives that have lived over 100 as a man, I'm pretty confident I can make it to 25. And I did make it to 25. So now I'm hoping for 50. We'll see how that goes. An intergenerational hobby is one of the things I will need if I actually do make it, though. Because let's say there are kids or aren't kids, grandchildren or no grandchildren. If I make something for myself and I go through it and I sit with my thoughts for 1 year, even assuming I'm making projects for 1 year, that can be very exciting. But to do something solo for 100 years is just kind of insane. So you're probably going to have to involve some other people. And so if it's intergenerational, that should be kind of fun, because it's like, well, you know, I'm me, but these people are also partially me. So maybe we could work on this thing together. And it's not necessarily that you want to have the book as a thing that multiple people write in. It might be that you write in it and then you pass it on to somebody else before you die. I guess you could also do it after you die. That's fine. But that wouldn't really help within the 100-year life. It would just help the people afterwards. But it might not actually help them, because, you know, information changes very quickly now. Yeah, and it might also be that after 80, the brain starts to break down a little bit. So even if you are chilling for a century, the brain might not be doing so great. Stress test. So how do you test this? Well, instead of passing a book on every 20 years or 30 years, I think we should do it like every year. So we can have this as a thing for students to optimize rather than the individual. Because if it's the individual optimizing it, they're going to get stuck in their own they're going to get stuck in their own head, they're going to get stuck in their own thoughts, they're going to just be going through their own book over and over and over again, and that's kind of ridiculous. Now, you can make this a little bit better with the generations. So, you have the kid and then the grandkid, and people work on it for, 20 years, 40 years, 60 years, whatever. And that's technically fine, but it's still the same problem as the original person, because it's just one person going through a bunch of stuff and trying to trim it down. But if you have it as a thing for students, and you have the students transfer their stuff. Let's say we have one student who does well, and they pass on their notes to 2 students. Now, what this means is, say you have 100 students. Yeah, we're talking about 100 years, and now we're talking about 100 students. It's just 100 over and over again. If you have 100 students, you take the notes from the top 50 performers, and you give them to the next 100 students. And so this means the notes of each person who did well is having 2 copies of their notes passed on. And so if we do this every single year, it should be that the notes that are the most helpful are the ones that everyone has. Now, obviously, the people who only have 10 people using their notes, their stuff isn't distributed to everyone, but whoever's stuff is the best will eventually have a portion of it distributed to everyone. Hopefully you understand where I'm going with this, but I've talked about this in many other videos, so we're going to move on. Surpassing limitations. Remember, if you have 100 students do this, it's probably better than one person living to 100 and just going super deep into it, because if the 100-year-old, has lots of thoughts and they think through things, which, they probably had to think through some stuff at some point to make it all the way to 100, there is a limitation to their thoughts, and eventually their brain will break and their body will break, and they're just not going to be around forever. But by having this as a thing which is like a living document that every student passes on to another student, or half of them pass on to all the students, we can kind of surpass the limitations of the generations and the finite lifespan. Because if we have the student work on this when they're 15, and we have the next student work on this when they're 15, and we have the student after that work on it when they're 15. You could have 1,500 students in a row. I mean, that would be a ridiculous length of time, but it is possible to surpass the limitations if we're not focusing on one individual. Value of the degree. Okay, so this is one reason why I think degrees are kind of weird right now. So there is the whole issue of people not really knowing what school is for. Like, some people will say it's for learning all the things. They're like, university, that means universal, like universal knowledge. And then other people will say it's just training wheels. We're just learning some things about things, and we'll get there eventually. Which sounds kind of similar. But there are also some people who treat it just as technical training or just job training. And like, those are not the same. That's building towards a specific goal, rather than just thinking about what makes us unique. Like, you're just going to be a good person, and everything great is going to happen, and it's going to be magical. Yeah, I don't know about that. It'd be cool if that worked. Maybe in the future we're just going to try to be good people, and then we're going to have a way to donate or send tips to whoever is the most unique or whoever seems the most genuine. But then we're probably going to have like a non-genuine test, and that's going to be virtue signaling, but also virtually. Like, it doesn't make any sense. So what makes us unique if we're using this thing that students have been optimizing? What is the unique stuff if we all have the same system? Well, we're not all going to have the same system, because I'm talking about just doubling whatever exists and, getting rid of the things that weren't doubled. And so even in the system where everyone is getting the best notes from the people who came before them, they're still getting unique notes. And what they choose to save is probably also going to be unique as well. So even if all the original source material comes from like 10,000 different locations, if they summarize it down to 100 things, the likelihood of the people having the same 100 things as everyone else is pretty low. Securing the future. Okay, so one of the reasons I externalize thinking is because I want my system to continue to exist for as long as I do. Hopefully longer, but all it has to do is make it for the duration of my life. And the reason for that is because at some point my brain will break down. And I'm not happy about that, and I don't think it'll happen in my 30s. I hope it doesn't happen in my 40s. But I think it's probable that after 80, I will start to slow down at the very least. One of the biggest illnesses in the world right now is something that causes brain problems, as well as a whole bunch of inflammation. And yeah, it's probably not great to have the memory loss disease when we also have the memory eliminating machine. And then not trying to externalize our thinking into a place where we actually do concentrated thought at specific times. Because if we're not thinking in general, and then we're not making a place to think more critically, or just deeper, or more in general, I don't really know what sort of brain I'm going to have if I make it to 100, so I kind of need to prep for the possibility that my brain's not going to work. Securing the future, I hope we did that, but, maybe I have the memory problems. Maybe we did this already. Take up space. Alright, this takes up physical space, and that's kind of annoying because I have to store it. However, one of the benefits of having a thing that takes up physical space is it's not digital, which means I can't just delete it with a button by accident, because that would be very bad. It's also possible that somebody else could delete the thing with a button. That is always a risk, so it's good to have at least, a little bit of the stuff physical. Returns on data. So, what are the returns? What are the benefits? Are you going to get anything out of a paper system? I think you'll get a little bit out of a paper system regardless. I'm sorry, it's very humid right now, and I'm very distracted, but that's because I just woke up from a nap. And you don't really need to know this information. So what are the returns on the data I just gave you? Well, you heard I just took a nap, and the video is very long at this point. So you know that instead of doing one of my normal things where I record a set of 4, I broke the recording up a little bit, or at least the recording session. And so this means this is once again the first video of the set, even though there's only one more video to go in the set of 4. So unless you're watching the entire playlist, that's not really beneficial. A place of your own. One of the great things about having a binder is you have a place to put all your stuff, and nobody else is going to look at it. You might also have this digitally, but for me, it feels a little bit more reliably mine, and not anybody else's if it's physical rather than online. Or just on a computer. Pantry of Ideas. So I actually grabbed this from my little Pantry of Ideas. It's not always the most beneficial to just grab things at random, but this does allow for much faster generation. So this is the same sort of problem with all the AI generated stuff. It does allow you to do the thing faster, but if you're not going through the data in a way where you're thinking about it, you're just going to be generating more and more stuff. And so I'm not really happy about this selection of the stuff from the Pantry of Ideas. I think for a person who's never seen the channel before, this is, pretty good. But for a person who's already seen some of my videos, they're probably going to be like, what are you doing? Why is it like this? There's so much information in here that could be its own video. You keep pointing to, for students to optimize. Maybe, the video should be about that. The value of a degree is... That's a pretty big conversation topic. And so the stuff is just tossed in here. Oh yeah, my YouTube story. And I have to go through it, but it's also an entire video idea. So why is it just some random thing in here? And you might have this sort of problem if you create this sort of Pantry of Ideas. You'll have all these little places and things that you want to go or look at or expand on, or there are a lot of options. And so it's one thing when someone can't decide which thing they want to click on based on their algorithmically generated feed, but it's another thing when they've selected a bunch of things that they want to work on, and they still can't figure out what to click on. Can get a little stressful sometimes. So, I don't know if I talked enough about what my system is. Basically, this is a commonplace binder, which is basically a commonplace book, but with no index or page numbers because things move around, and page numbers don't make sense if things move around, and then there's no index because the index is based on the page numbers. So instead of the index, I use a content section. To make the content section easier to work with, I add a little tab to the top of each page, which matches the title on the page and in the content section. So what is a commonplace book? A commonplace book is the thing that existed before computers, and it happened to be owned by rich people mostly, and that's because, you know, if you're using the highest tech thing, it's probably mostly going to be owned by rich people, just because rich people have the money to buy whatever, and then the rest of us are, you know, like, I don't know, is this worth the money? Like, we're doubting everything because we don't have infinite funds. Take notes. So one of the things you can do with this playlist is you can take some notes on it. If you want to make videos based on these videos, you know, let me know. Because there might be some things I don't really want people to do, and there might also be some things I want people to do. But you should also probably just do your own stuff. All I'm saying is, like, if you're specifically grabbing, like, little things, it might be nice for, like, a shout out or something. Who knows? So up next we have Handmade Encyclopedia. We're just talking about commonplace binder stuff, and we're going to keep doing that until we get to the last video. Although a little bit before that, we're going to have the flip through video, which I've been very stressed about because I have cards set up for it, but it is an actual flip through, so I'm not really sure if I'm going to record all of the cards, and then it's going to be like a voiceover as I flip through the stuff, but I think it makes sense to just do like a standard flip through. So I'm not really sure what the cards are going to be for. Maybe they'll just be like a little side thing, or maybe that'll be like the end of the video where I'm like, surprise, we're going to talk about it. But that would feel like two different videos. So again, I don't know how that's going to go. Up next we have Handmade Encyclopedia, which I talked about a little bit earlier, and that'll be the video. So thank you for being around for one of the longest videos on the channel, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.